I feel very this very extraordinary kind of moment going on in humanity, and I've been traveling around the world and just completed a 37th trip around, and I'm not a tourist. This is purely incidental to the way life goes, and I certainly just beginning to feel our planet as really being a sphere. It's a very, very big sphere to you and I, but I'm beginning to really have some personal feeling of this as a home. People often ask me where I live, and I say I don't mean to be facetious or rude, but I live in a little planet called Earth, and that's what we really all do. But it's interesting now. I've gotten to the point where I can really feel it as comprehensible, and I've had it statistically solved and made many maps of the world, and made drawings of the world time and again, but to actually begin to feel it pulsing together. And so I'm really confident that humanity is now going through a state of transition on our planet, absolutely unprecedented, and is not number one. We have very much knowledge we didn't have long ago. Human beings, having always been born naked, helpless, no experience, therefore absolutely ignorant, and humanity has had to find its way. And humans are really endowed with, first place, we're given hunger, so we'd be sure to take on fuel. And we're given thirst, so we carry on the chemical process and to breathe, that's all spontaneous. And we're given a reproductive urge to reproduce ourselves, so we finally get to wherever we're supposed to get. Some kind of, we certainly obviously are here for something extremely important. The information that just said that is so that we take the complexity of the chemistries of human beings and all the principles that they demonstrate, that we know in physics, chemistry, that there's nothing quite so complex we know of in all the universe, short of universe itself. We seem to be almost miniature universes. And yet, being given hunger and reproductive urge and being born ignorant, man also was given sort of a vanity and a way to kid himself along, to excuse himself for making mistakes. That really mistakes, nothing could be more important. You have to find yourself by trial and error, but he's had a tendency to, I find, for instance, I personally have lived through very great change that was not anticipated by anybody when I was young. And as each stage occurs, everybody acts as if they knew that all the time. Right now, everybody knows anybody can go to the moon. That's a very easy thing to do. And humanity has then this strange way of immediately making themselves rather superior and retrospectively. The point is that I see these are characteristics, and I'm sure they are put there in many ways they would not really carry on if they might become much too discouraged if they didn't have this self-deceit to some extent. And so I find humanity so rationalizing that it intends to think of itself as responsible for this whole universe. And it looks on the stars and everything, just sort of decoration, and the whole show is right here, and what you and I decide the way the next election goes is the way the whole universe is going to go. So I go through exercise myself very frequently, which I think about what we do know about the scale of things and the general information. Where we find our little planet is 8,000 miles in diameter. The highest mountains 5 miles above sea level, the deepest water 5 miles below that. 10 miles differential between the outermost points and the innermost points. and 10 miles in relation to 8,000, 1/800th. If you make a sphere, or it might be a big 6-foot sphere, if it polished steel, it'd probably be rougher than is our actual Earth. So when we have photographs being made of coming in to the Earth now through the cloud cover, you can't make out there's a blue of water and there's a brown land. There's no slight suggestion of any altitude or any depth. And you and I, human beings, average about, between birth and their total life, take all humans and average out the children, all about 5 feet, about 5,000 feet to a mile. So it takes 1,000 of us laid end to end to make a mile. So it would take 10,000 of us to make the difference between the outermost points and the innermost points. So the fact that that's invisible, you and I, about 1/10,000 of invisible on that planet. And that planet is a very small planet, as the planets of the sun. And the sun itself is a rather inferior star. If you look at Orion's belt, which is very, very familiar to most people in the sky, there's a brighter star, there's Betelgeuse, and Betelgeuse's diameter is greater than the orbit of the Earth around the sun. That's a good-sized star. So we have this inferior star, and it's one of 100 billion stars in our galaxy. And human beings, endowed with the capability to discover principles and to develop refraction of light and to make lenses and so forth, we now have developed telescopes and taken photographs of 1 billion such galaxies. We now know of 1 billion galaxies of approximately 100 billion stars each. Now, in that kind of this observation is omnidirectional. Out of all those stars, 99.99% are invisible to the naked eye, but we've been able to increase our information, get to have it there, so that we multiply a billion times 100 billion, which would be the number of stars we now know about, and try and make 1 billion times 100 billion points around us as a sphere, for instance. You find that really be like having a steel shell and have all the atoms in a steel shell around us would be something like that, the relative plenitude of those stars. I'm thinking about some such a big, enormous shell, sphere, and trying to find a point somewhere near a sun, and trying to find even a planet Earth somewhere in there would be absolutely impossible. At our magnitude, to try to find you and I, incredible. I'm quite confident that show is not depending on whether the conservatives or Labor comes in, or whether it's Republicans or Democrats. I'm sure that universe is absolutely indifferent. That this couldn't be more nonsense. We really are playing some games on board of our planet that have nothing to do with the really great big show. So I've been terribly excited through my life to try to find, if I could, any of the clues of what the bigger show might be, how we happen to be here. One of the things you and I can observe out of the total data so far is that amongst all the living organisms, biological organisms, human beings are not only about halfway between the biggest and the smallest, but they have something that distinguishes them from all the other species, as all the other species have some integral equipment built in, as wings or something, special feelers, designed for special environments. And so the bird gets on beautifully in the air, flying, but when it's not flying, it cannot divest itself of its special equipment and is hampered very greatly by it. So whether it's in a special kind of a plant that grows, as we know, just in a special kind of an area, this is all typical. But human beings have, not uniquely, because there are many creatures that have brains, we simply have a little more storage for special case information. And then what human beings have over and above this brain, the brain is always correlating the smellings, the seeings, the hearings, all the sensings, and also can store it, and it has after image, it can recall, bring back again. And then human beings have the phenomenon of mind, and I find mind and brain often used seemingly interchangeably, but I find necessity for the word mind, because there's something goes on with the human beings, not in the brain, As I said, the brain is always and only dealing with these special case information. Because from time to time, mind discovers a relationship between special case information that's not in the special case information by itself. It's only by a great complex. For instance, long ago, historically, we have humans making it clear that they are aware of 5 quite bright stars, unusually bright, that seem to move differently. The rest of the stars seem to be all in one position. They move around the universe together. But there was 5 in addition lights in the sky other than the sun and the moon that seemed to move around but they didn't move around in any correlated kind of way that you and I could know about. They're just simply different positions. So gradually, the fact that there were 5 bright lights doing something different made human beings intuitively say, because they're different, they may have some relationship with one another. Gradually, human beings did make observations and did chart quite a lot about the planets. They got quite a lot of data back in Greece and Mesopotamia, Egypt. Then, it's not until man develops the capability to calculate, and Roman numerals were operative up to 1200 A.D., which is a very short time ago. There are many things on the UK that are 1200 ago, no time at all ago. Man began to be able to do, not until 1500, does he actually get out of the public domain how to do things, positioning of numbers to multiply. If you ever try to multiply or divide with Roman numerals, you find out you would have, no matter how excited you might be about things you observe around you, if you try to make some calculation, you don't know where to calculate. So 1500 is when what we call positioning of numbers, or when I first went to school, when I went downtown, the butcher said, "Have you learned to do your ciphers yet?" Ciphers was a clue. Ciphers made you position your numbers. And Copernicus comes in just when man has that first chance to really do some calculating. And with his calculating capability, he began to calculate that our position of observation might be a planet also. And then he stimulated Tycho Brahe, who was a man of wealth, to invest his wealth in a great many instruments to observe. And Kepler did most of the observing and did really amass some very extraordinary new data. I'd just like to think about, in relation to things I've been talking about, this betweenness that's not ours as far as discovering relationship go. Kepler then had all the very accurate data on the orbits, found they were moving in ellipses, and if you and I ever make an ellipse instead of a circle, we know we have to have 2 restraints. And he found then they were moving in ellipses, and he had all the data on what the length of time of the orbits of each one of them, what the sizes were, how far out they were from the sun at any given time. But all of them were different. They were different sizes, different distances, going around the sun at different rates. But one thing in common was they're going around the sun. So they apparently were a team, but it was very disconcerting that there was such disorder. This team, first place, is a very amazing thing that they, in the enormous distances they were apart, that they could be doing anything as a team. You don't know why. So Kepler then, with mathematical capability, which means you really can make some mathematical hypothesis, he said, I've got to find something that's common to all of them, because there's nothing in their dimensions or their distances or the times of orbit that is common. So he gave them a very small amount of time, which would be common to all of them. He gave them all 2 weeks. I think that was the period, maybe 3. That's irrelevant for the moment. He gave them a very short amount of time, and because he knew how far each one was from the sun, he gave them 2 weeks. He knew exactly how much arc each one would describe in 2 weeks. So he made then a line, theoretical line, from the sun to where it started, and then 2 weeks later, that's the end of the arc, and it came back to the sun again, making a piece of pie shape. So within the same 2 weeks, he then had the shapes of the dimensions of these pieces of pie described by each one. Some are long and thin, or some are short and fat. But because he had this data now, he was able then to calculate the area. And this sort of strange thing, actually calculate the area of nothingness really of space, but he calculated the areas of those pieces of pie, and he found within that given amount of time they're all exactly the same. Supposing you were the first human being to do that, having seen a superficial disorder, but suddenly an incredibly elegant mathematical agreement hidden away there. That there's something correlating there between relative distance away and the rate of going around that all come out the same. So then he said, I could understand this if they were gears and touching each other. We can understand how, but being fantastic distance apart, how can they possibly develop this extraordinary correlated action? So he said, well, one thing about it, I do see then if I swing a weight around my head, it goes in orbit. If I let go, it goes off in a line. There's apparently is some kind of a tensive restraint, because there's no compressive restraint that you'd have with gears. But somehow or other, over incredible distances of the heavens, there's tensive effectiveness. We come on to Galileo, also now with mathematical calculating capability, 1500, making measurements on rates of bodies going down inclined planes at various angles, then free falling. Galileo discovering this free falling rate, the rate was always accelerating, and the rate it was accelerating was actually multiplying the number times itself, what we'd call second power. And then we have Isaac Newton, very excited by all these people, and wondering if he could not somehow or other identify something more about that tensive relationship that Kepler had identified. Then, so Isaac Newton, also using mathematical freedom to hypothesize something, he said, I see then if I do have a weight on a string, like Kepler, and I let go, it goes off in a line. So he formulated his first law of motion by saying a body would persist in a straight line except as affected by other bodies. So when he sent this off like this, they found the Earth immediately began to pull on it. If he did a little harder, went just a little further, then got pulled over 90 degrees. So he said, obviously, whatever that pull thing is, the Earth has a very much more powerful effectiveness than I have in sending it out that way. Then also, considering the information man had at that time regarding moon and Earth, and knowing that you had the moon phases and the tides are clearly identified, that quite clearly the moon was pulling the waters of the Earth trillions of tons daily. The pull must be fantastically great between these two bodies, which was so much bigger than Newton himself. So he said, I think that the inter-attraction has something to do with their sizes. And I can understand then why then the pull of these two big bodies, the Earth's such a big pull that two apples are too small to their pull towards each other is so meager that the pull of the Earth overcomes its friction and would not allow them to come together. So you and I have not tended to be confronted with the bodies are pulling each other, but it's then maybe proportional to mass. That's a very good guessing job in his part. So then he then said, supposing, these are not his words, but this is the concept. Supposing the Earth suddenly stops pulling on the moon, that is, the Earth is annihilated, then it would go off in this line, this way, a weight that you're swinging around your head, you stop pulling it, go off this way. Then it gradually be affected by other celestial bodies. So Isaac Newton then, because astronomers by this time had good plotting for any given moment of any evening, of where the various constellations would be, this has been well observed, and the navigators were using this data very well. He then was able to figure where the moon would be on a given night at a given time, where it would be positioned against other constellations. And so then on that night, he assumed that the Earth would then, at that moment, release so he then quite easily mathematically developed the line at which it would go off if the Earth suddenly released it. That was easy to plot. So then on that night, at that moment, he measured the rate the moon was falling away from the theoretical line towards the Earth. He found that it was falling towards the Earth at exactly the same rate as Galileo's accelerating second power pull of the falling bodies. This then gave him a clue about the second power. So then he formulated the idea that first you have then the relative intertractiveness as against two apples or whatever it might be was due to the masses. But then if you halve the distance between the two, quite clearly, because of the second power, you halve the distance, and the intertractiveness would be fourfold. Or if you double the distance apart, then the intertractiveness would be reduced to 1/4 what it was. So he spoke about it as the inverse ratio of the second power. At that time, the literacy of humanity was so low, I'm sure very few humans heard that Newton had said what he said. The astronomers did, and many astronomers paid great attention. So they began to apply his hypothetical law to celestial phenomena in general. And surely enough, it explained every bit of it. He did not know we were going to get in the microcosm as we have today. He did not know that when we came to where there's no electromagnetics in the atomic world, that mass attractions are opposite follow his exact laws. So that this has turned out to be an absolutely reliable behavioral law. So now I'm coming back to brain then taking in special data, recording and so forth, but mind very apparently spurred on by intuition that something's going on here that's worth pursuing, that's really inspiring human beings to spend their whole lives at such work as Kepler did. There, you suddenly discovered a relationship existing between. There was nothing in the geometry, the geometrical dimensions of our Earth or geometrical dimensions of the Moon. There was nothing in the chemistry of either or anything in the electromagnetics of them that said, observing one by itself, that it's going to attract another body. Absolutely nothing. Certainly, there was nothing in any one of those bodies said if you halve the distance, the intertraction is going to increase at fourfold or second power exponentially. What I'm really trying to get out, I don't think anything more important for me to catch on to, or you to catch on to, we really want to understand a little about what human beings do have that is unique in the universe, which is this mind, is this ability to discover relationships existing between that are not of any of the special case data. So, and brains are always dealing just that special case data. That's why I realize that I have to identify, so the word mind is the most convenient word I can find, to have this capability to discover relationships existing between. If you ask Mr. Newton then what this gravity is, you say, obviously I can't tell you because there's no quality or characteristic of any of the parts that you can point to. All we know is a relationship existing. In other words, when you get to the beginnings of great science, the experimental undertaking, you discover an a priori absolute mystery, within which a priori absolute mystery, a lucidly behaving regularity occurs, an incredible, lovely thing. These are we have the word synergy, or the behavior of whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of any of the parts considered only separately. So we find all the great scientific discoveries are exactly that. They are discovering the behavior between that is not of in any way indicated is going to happen by any of the parts themselves. So all the great scientific discoveries are synergetic. And in fact, I found that, I don't know how many of you know me and met with me in years gone by, but I have now visited over 500 universities and colleges around the world. And for the first 300 such visits, I would ask the audience, anybody familiar with the word synergy, please raise their hand. And I would have somebody stand up in front with me, help me count, get a little idea of the percentage. The university audiences around the world average 3%, and public ones less than 1%. So that I could see quite clearly the word was not popular, and inasmuch as the word is the only word that means behavior of whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of the parts, synergy is the only word that means that, quite clearly society was not thinking there are such behaviors, or they would have really wanted the word. The fact that it was not a popular word meant it was not in the general rationalizing and logic. I saw human beings then were quite content to just know about parts. They're content to be taken to school and say, now, darling, I'm going to give you an A and B and C, and just to work on parts, putting things together. the idea they build up a body of knowledge would be that the whole sum total, that's all there was to it. And this is quite contrary then to me it's very, very exciting. I find myself really pulling a curtain apart to understand a little of what really has gone on historically, of the gradual trial and error gains of naked, helpless, ignorant man finally discovering such a phenomenon, that he's got endowed also with the intuition that somehow rather titivates him that something's going on around me and I better pursue it. And sometimes pursued for centuries, millenniums before he really finds out. Now, the fact then that human beings have this capability and the relationships they find can only be expressed mathematically. They have no physical reality. They are something like second power, multiplying the mass of time cells in second power into relationship again. They're all of them mathematically statable. These are really then called scientific generalizations. And let's say you've discovered the principle of the lever. This is a very extraordinary matter for a man to discover. With our muscles to lift things up, that he discovers that with a lever you can lift, a little human being can lift maybe 20 times his own weight. Fantastic manner. So he's able to operate and alter his environment in favorable ways for survival. Well, to get the mathematics of that leverage is a very beautiful thing. Just going out the distance from the fulcrum to the load and go out one equal increments just in balance, and we call it a balance scale. Go out 2 increments, you have exactly lift 2 to 1, so forth. Beautiful arithmetical rate of gain. However, having been able to generalize that's a mathematically statable, and only mathematically statable, and say, I'm going to design a generalized lever. So you can't design a generalized lever. It has to be a wood or steel or has to be such and such a length. I find that man then lives with his brain subjectively and always in special cases, and though he can discover the generalized principle and can use it, he can only employ it in another special case. And all the special cases are terminal. They're all to do with an entropic world of systems that are coming apart gradually. Everything is terminal. Whereas the principles themselves I talk about, generalized principles, in order to be able to qualify as generalized principle, there can be no exception. But you and I, because we operate so prominently with the brain deals always with terminals, tend to want to have things begin and end. We want to explain how the universe began and when it's going to end, or have that kind of, that's a brain way of looking at things. But the principles I speak about, you cannot be a principle and not be eternal. We don't tend to use that word eternal because the brain makes us think about terminal things. But the point is, to qualify, there must be absolutely no exception, which means inherently internal. So we find humans then gradually, accidentally, intuitively, pulling curtain aside, we're beginning to learn a little about some of these qualities of eternity, some laws of eternity, which no other creature, we don't know any other phenomena in the universe that has the capability. So we do know many with brains, we know many that can fly very beautifully, whatever it may be. But this is what we really have. And by virtue then of this ability to discover principles, human beings then Bernoulli discovers the principle of pressure differentials, and we develop a wing foil and the negative pressure, and man can make his own wing, fly now 50 times faster than any bird, take off his wings when he's not using it, give them to the next generation, give them to somebody else. The complete interchangeability, but the point is deals in principles. Now, I find that human beings then they have this largest information gathering special capability of the brain, special case experiences, but they have this ability to discover principles, and that really differentiates from any other phenomenon we know of. Now, that we have this then makes me immediately think we must have some significance. We must be in here for some very special reason. When you and I talk about design in contradistinction to randomness or disorder, we mean that the parts are arranged somehow in relation to other parts. That's what we mean by design. A deliberate arrangement of parts, that's the design. So I say then, one of the most extraordinary things we find out about these generalized principles so far, if we begin to take inventory of how many we have found and we know anything about, is that none of them ever contradict any others. Being eternal, they're eternally, concurrently operative, and all of them interaccommodating, never any contradict any of the others. When you get then a complex of interaccommodative principle, I say, I have to call this a design. Because they're all utterly orderly, they're only mathematically statable. We find that the interrelation, they can be interrelated, and they can, some of them even augment one another. So that I would say that gradually man has been pulling aside a curtain, and if you get a little peek at the great design of the universe itself. Just to give yourself a little jump on understanding the things I was saying to you, here was this principle of leverage, beautifully stated. Then Galileo discovers that the principle of the lever did not have to be a bar, that you had a rope going over a sheave and a pulley, and that each one of those increments of pulley, those same laws of the, this then became the word, instead of calling it leverage, we began to call it mechanical advantage. So the leverage principle could be operative in tension as well as in compression. Okay. So again, this made it even much more general than any special case way in which it had to be interpreted. And so all of our tech, really all machinery, everything we do is some kind of complex of that mechanical advantage principle. Now, this brings me to just also, to me, very important, the demand I find at the present day talking a great deal, very apprehensively about technology. Technology was something new that had come upon man to making trouble for him. What I have to observe is the universe is all technology, most extraordinary technology, the capability of you to sit where you are, for me to make sound waves, and for you to communicate and be interpreting this into identification of the experiences you have. Nothing could be more extraordinary that we don't really understand at all how and why we really, after this sexual conceptioning and so forth, we've been able to trace some of the way it goes, but understanding of this extraordinary phenomenon is very, very, very slight. Anyway, we are this very complex phenomenon, and we are somehow rather we hear people talk about biological design, but we might try to improve human beings, might tamper with human beings. I see that really can't occur because we do not live in a line where our experience is omnidirectional. And we are actually right in the middle of things instead of having any specialization built in. We have only one thing, more information containing capability. And we have a sensing capability, but we're able, in principle, to increase the sensing capability through understanding refraction of light and developing optics and so forth, get us the kind of information I've been giving you, referring to, that we've gained. We're in this center and absolutely devoid of this special equipment. This is the main thing. This is all sensing stuff here, but there's the main part is almost a sphere, and really the center. Now you can't improve on the center. You can improve on the linears and the specialists. So if he has wings, you can make a little better integral wings for him. You could inbreed that kind of capability, but you cannot improve on center. Otherwise, I do not expect any real tampering with the human being on our planet to occur in terms of biological. You could deform him. I'm sure that you're going to be able to repair him, but if you repair him, you only get in the center. So you can't improve on the center. It really becomes quite exciting to see that. That's exactly where he is. Now, coming to some more of this thinking that I've just given you, I find that I would like to have some idea why we have this extraordinary kind of capability that no other creature has. I want to think about a very complex design. Incidentally, coming back to that technology, I don't want to go by. I simply say that we can use our technology positively or negatively. And I could take a pencil and I could stab a guy with it. It seemed to me a very ridiculous thing to do. But it's beautiful. I can really improve our interrelationships by using it to communicate, but using it this way, I'm really going very negatively. But the point is the technology can be used positively and negatively. And man, in his ignorance, has also had a very great deal of fear. Having this born with a hunger and a reproductive urge, and then he gets his children. I don't think human beings are really very fearful for themselves. I think that tremendously the love for those who are dependent on them is a thing that really induces their fear in very, very great ways. So that I see man really laboring under a great deal of fear in his ignorance and holding on to this and that, and that's all very understandable. And I see him then, which he has quite clearly out of his total experience, sum totally in his ignorance, he's come to assume that there never will be enough life support to go around on our planet. And on the basis that there's nowhere nearly enough to go around, a great many people are going to have to die very early in poverty and all the deprivations of poverty. So you may be then you have everything to win and nothing to lose, and you come to a war, see, your side is starving, and you may get a chance by going to war. So I see the only reason we have politics on our planet is because of this lethal assumption that there's nowhere nearly goes around. So the man says, I've got a little better way, I've a little more information, and got things pretty well organized. You come along with me, and your chances of survival and the chance of your family surviving are better. That I have all the great ideologists say, you may not like our system, but we have the most logical and fair way to get on with this fundamental, absolute negative condition of inadequacy, fundamental. So you find in economics, and the economists who advise all the politicians, the model of economics is fundamental inadequacy. When economists then are asked to come in and help the politician, all they know is about you might increase the inadequacy. You could control prices and this and that by manipulating the inadequacy, but that's all the ordeal in. And on this basis then we have little human beings and little groups, little tribes getting a little bigger, seemingly as they gradually learn a little more, some of these principles that speak about leverage, they're able to do a little more, apparently get to take care of a little more people, but nobody's sort of taking any sum total inventory of what this is all about, and saying, well, maybe there's enough for both of our sides. We take care of both families, of both these tribes, so get into huddles and little larger alliances. So we're finally now with a world basis of two really primarily large camps. One assuming that you have to have very great freedom of the individual to move and enterprise or whatever it may be, and the other one saying, no, we've got to have it purely highly socialized. And we have the what I just said to you became just a little over a century ago here in England, became seemingly a scientific fact. We'd had humanity feeling what I said was so, but no real confirmation of it in any kind of scientific way. I want to point out to you that up to the time of what was called the British Empire, the empires of Genghis Khan or the Roman Empire, Alexander the Great, any of them, areas. And look at the maps of them, and they are a map primarily surrounding the Mediterranean, going certain distances away into Africa, but just going to nowhere. You don't know what's out there. They were, if you would actually take the area of all those great largest empires and measure what it was in terms of total surface, it was less than 15%. It's amazing how terribly important that 15% seemed to be. At any rate, that's all you knew. And apparently it was open edge and went to infinity. That's all you knew. To point out what we call the British Empire is the first empire that occurs after Magellan has brought into the public knowledge that the Earth is a sphere. And they got to be saying the British Empire, the sun never set on it and so forth. The point was, it was a sphere. Now, when you get a sphere is a closed system, and all the previous empires were open systems. There were planes going to infinity. And if they went to infinity, there were always an infinite number of chances that you're going to find what you need, and there's infinite room to get rid of anything you didn't want. And because of an infinite number of chances, you have infinite hope. So before you get a hold of the right God, you're going to come out all right. So people had an enormous amount of hope, and they're looking around for the right God, the right guidance. So when we come to this British Empire phenomenon, which incidentally was not British Empire, the three-quarters of the earth is water, and the men who are able to master the sea and stay at sea, developing ships with extraordinary engineering, and were taking great riches from the Orient, where civilization apparently developed earlier, and there were enormous riches, and they were taking them to Europe to cash in as civilization was moving westward. And so the newer civilization was wanting some of the fruits of the earlier gains of man. And what we call the British Isles were the unsinkable flagship commanding the most harbors and most customers. And the fighting over those islands to see who really is going to command the sailors, the sailor men of the coast of Ireland and Scotland. So these are all water people, and the Vikings, everybody trying to take over those islands. Now, what at the time what we call this British Empire is the East India Company. It actually was an enterprise. The East India Company, then the UK was a western terminal of its run from the Orient. And it had very conveniently had very good woods and metals and things to rebuild your ship or to build a new ship. But it was really simply, these were water people. They were world people with a very important terminal headquarters on these islands. So they were really running the world. If you could go, I was visiting Professor Bristol for a while. You can still find the brothels where they hit the men over the head when they came out of the brothel and threw them on board the ship. There was not a violent. The British Empire didn't develop out of some ambition of people on these islands to run the world, but you needed crews for those ships, so they were the most convenient available, and most of them hit over the head and were thrown on board. So that the ships are appearing around the world. Has so many of these people from the British Isles got to be known as the British Empire. It's really very important for us to reconsider our history about how the real things really do come about. Anyway, as you now know, there still is the East India Company College. It's a very nice campus. And in 1800, the East India Company College had a professor of economics, Thomas Malthus. And Thomas Malthus had an extraordinary experience because he's the first economist in the history of man to get vital statistics from around a closed system, spherical Earth. And he got this, how the people are multiplying themselves, and he wrote 2 books. In his second book, he confirmed his first book by saying, quite clearly, with those vital statistics, humanity is multiplying itself at a geometrical rate, producing goods to support itself only at an arithmetical rate. Quite clearly, it's scientifically in evidence man's designed to be failure. This is the first time you have any confirmation of this fearful suspicion humanity had that man is supposed to be failure, but said now it's absolutely clear. We're only talking about 1800, no time at all ago, absolutely no time ago. And then following that, we have the biologists and geologists who could see things through microscopes, and the great masters of the water-ocean world took them around to look at things that they couldn't see with their own naked eye, because they realized these things that the scientists could see were exploitable, as long as they were mastering that water-ocean world and wanted to know what was exploitable, what could be merchandised. So Darwin's amongst those biologists being taken around, and geologists, and with the other biologists discovering, because it's this closed system Earth, this is all the species there are, and so you find they break it into really quite clearly categories of the vertebrates or whatever it may be, and explain the design as a consequence of the survival only of the fittest. For instance, with wild horses, there is from time to time a big young stallion born. Didn't has to be, but he's bigger than the other young stallions being born. And there's a king stallion immediately challenges this young stallion, and whichever one wins is the one who's going to inseminate the herd. This way Darwin showed that the most powerful strains then kept that particular species going. Now, we have then the great master of the water ocean world, was the East India Company, had two scientists. One who said that quite clearly the dynamics are clear, there's nowhere nearly enough to go around, man's supposed to be a failure. And there's another scientist saying survival only the fittest. So they said quite clearly we must be the fittest because we're on top of the heap. And our kind of tactics of being good, very fast with the sword, and we've been very powerful using our wealth to build our ships, whatever it may be, that we're just smart and we have all the right information. And we have in England also Karl Marx, and Karl discovered both the Darwinian and the Malthus Darwin, said he agreed on the principle that there was nowhere nearly enough to go around, survival only the fittest. But quite clearly he said the worker is the fittest because he knows how to handle the rock and the wood, and he has all those tools. He knows how to make the seeds grow. These other people are parasites. These became then the two great extreme ways of looking at things, with both sides assuming not enough to go around, and that is still absolutely the condition. As a consequence, the great ideological powers for the last 20 years, averaging United States, China, Russia, NATO, some totally appropriating annually $200 billion a year for getting ready for Armageddon, see which one is going to survive. This is not just dollars, but all the highest capability of man, highest priority getting ready for the big kill. Everything organized around it. It is, you can understand that this is not a, obviously that leads to an Armageddon. And what began to really interest me was by luck I came into the United States Navy at the time of World War I. And I came in just as electronics were coming in, as the airplane was just coming in, and so forth, and the submarine. And I realized that it's a very extraordinary matter, but on our ship, for instance, we had refrigeration. The ships of the sea, incidentally, gone from the wooden ship to the steel steamship, and in order to be able to have a steel steamship, you had then to have a great deal of oxygen getting to those engines down way deep in the hold of the ship. So what we call air conditioning really developed entirely for the ships. You had to have desalinization. You couldn't possibly have that steamship without it. You had down deep in the hold, you had a great deal of power over there, big engine, but there's no light way down below the porthole, so you developed electricity. All the great electrical generating equipment, all the air conditioning, refrigeration, desalinization, all began at sea. And not until it absolutely satisfied all the shipbuilding to exploit this world commerce that they suddenly found, well, you have a capability set up to manufacture dynamos, and suddenly found they could be sold to towns on the land. This began to be a great preoccupation of the people who had been the great exploiters of the world commerce of integrating resources, realized that they could make a great deal of money out of just manufacturing dynamos or for the people on the land. That really opened up another kind of an era. But here I was in the Navy, and we had refrigeration. We'd had it for 20 years, and there was no refrigeration in the land yet. I said, Malthus was assuming these foods would rot over here, and would never reach the mouths over there, and now I see that's not so. And Malthus didn't know we were going to take tin from the Malay Straits and flow it very thinly onto thin steel sheet, make tin cans and hermetically seal food so that it could really be preserved. The foods could not only be preserved, but could reach people anywhere around the world. It didn't have to be where the roots were. People that really had legs, but they sort of had roots because they were guarding the places where life could be supported by what they found in their ignorance, the place where the things did grow, the bananas on the tree. And so men at first are guarding those, and they're very fixed, because if we get down to the total amount of our surface of our earth, 3/4 being covered with water, 1/4 of dry land, but that quarter is dry land, radially covered with ice, just rocks, mountains, deserts. We get down to the amount of our earth, where life being born naked no skins or anything, where it could really survive originally. Probably less than 1% of the total surface of the earth had life support spontaneously there, to be fruit to be picked and so forth, milk of the coconut to be drunk. And so that 1% broken up very, very small increments of these people very far away from one another. It was not a big spread out, and you have to realize how tiny little man was in that kind of a big pattern. We find then what we have to see called the city-states, where the human beings are finding a safe place, where life did seem to be supported, continually being invaded by other people who were less fortunate. They had a good place, but they got draughted out, or they got burned out of one reason or another, and they heard these people have something over in this valley. They're suddenly being invaded by absolutely desperate tribes. So the city-state develops, where they build great walls around a hill in the middle of the fertile valley, and they find a hill that has a well. So they can have then the walls and the water's inside, and they put grain bins. When they see the enemy coming, put all the food inside the walls, and they scorch the field. So the enemy came, and you can only go 30 days without food, so they were already on the way towards weakness. So from inside the walls, they simply watched them get weaker, and now they go out and decimate them, just let them die off. So this was a city-state, and archaeologically we find it was very, very successful. But finally, some of the city-states became so relatively powerful and were lucky enough in their positioning, gradually building ships. And a new thing happened, which really begins with the fall of Troy, where Mycenae is very strong, goes and builds ships and develops something called the line of supply. With the line of supply and ships, you could then bring to the people besieging, who used to then die off of starvation, suddenly could be supplied by ships. We look at Italy, for instance, and you see all those castellos there. Fantastic, where they're built on those hills to be the ideal city-state, and for that guarding that particular valley. But none of the walls of the castellos of Italy are breached, because what happened was these ships gradually developed, engineering developed at sea, and the ships then could carry enormous cargoes. And they came up to a port in Italy and said, and they licked this man at that port with his castello. They had guns on the ships and so forth. They said, now, we want you to go and besiege each one of these castles around here. And people decide to think they're going to outlast you, but we ought to have our men with line supply bring food up to you. That's exactly how Venice then has no walls whatsoever. And Venice took over the whole show to the displeasure of the rest of Italy by simply having the line of supply. The line of supply became the new game, and it still is the big game. Whoever then controlled the high seas and the line of supply really then began to be the master of the earth. I just want to give you some of the grand strategies that were operative here. In order for you to, I just say these things in order to understand how we still maintain the ignorance. There's not enough to go around, and how the great political bodies are still so engaged. But here I landed in the Navy, and what I was learning in that Navy was that, in contradistinction to the land war of the big heavy walls, the bigger and heavier and higher the walls, the more secure you felt. There's something new going on here, where in order to go to sea, you couldn't have a stone ship that would just go to the bottom. And at sea, we had to really have tensile capability. And the wood could provide it, and stone masonry couldn't. And while the ship would not last very long, it could be made very strong to handle enormous interaction. So engineering very greatly accelerated on the sea. And just the purely in the terms of inventorying what we know about our universe, the amount of energy necessary to disturb a crystalline state with really triple bonded affair takes an enormous amount to make an earthquake, and it takes very much less energy to disturb the liquid, and even less to disturb the gaseous. Also, we find in the universe that this is pure quantum wave mechanics. The big events occur less frequently. You can have a few big waves and a whole lot of little waves, so that the big energy events occur very infrequently. So very infrequently do we have enough energy to disturb the land with an earthquake, but very frequently we have enough energy locally available to disturb the water, and even more frequently to disturb the air, so that the interface between the air and the water of the sailing ship was just inherently a very looks very beautiful today, but suddenly it's absolutely lethally ferocious. And your ship has a beam. I'm going to make a beam. My arms are walls and my hands are the beam. When you have a load on top, the bottom tries to come apart. We have a ship which is for a moment two waves under its ends. It's a beam. Next minute the waves in the middle and there's a cantilever. And the stresses of breaking that ship up were incredible. So man really had developed engineering, and on the land you could shutter the windows and so forth, because the relative frequency of untoward events is not very high, so you had shut off in the world. But at sea you couldn't shut off. You had a 24-hour life. And with this 24-hour life at very high frequency of untoward events, engineering simply, that's why it prospered. It went very, very far ahead. So I found my ship business. Here I was in the Navy, and I learned about Malthus, and you could float incredible weights of engines. You could have anything that science had found out about could be incorporated in some technology on board. And I wondered why this was all done, getting ready for contact in the sea. When the two high seas fleet came out, the new challenger, the master of the seas, they said within second salvo, you know who was going to run the world for the next 25 years. That was the grand strategy summation as of the time of World War I. Well, I saw then one little airplane coming along, and there's a great chance that little airplane with one bomb is going to sink a battleship. I saw it doing very much less, and suddenly here was this radio. And up to this time, I wanted to get a message across the Atlantic. I had to send a pretty big ship to do it if we want to be sure to get there. Going to get there in a hurry, it has to be a good big ship. Suddenly, with 100 pounds of apparatus, I'm going to talk across the ocean at 186,000 miles a second. I saw we were really doing more with less. And in grand strategy of the sea, I like to just point out this because it's very, very important. Archimedes discovers the principle of displacement. And whatever the total geometrical volume of the ship may be, that weight of water is all the ship and its cargo and everything can weigh. So in this competition to see who is going to master the water ocean world and all the enormous wealth that could be generated by, they had the expression, wait till my ship comes. One trip and you make an absolute fortune by going to the Orient and bringing back these things that people pay such an enormous price for, which complemented what you had at home by the things you don't have at home. There was a synergetic effect. So we have the concept of contact sea who's going to control those sea lanes, and both sides know what size ship you're building. Any spies can see that and go and measure up the ship. So you know what the tonnage of the ships are going to be. And in designing boats, any of you do design boats, or sailboats, you know that we have different sizes, shapes of boats for different kind of tasks, and they get to be sort of optimum in relation to wavelengths and so forth, so that there were classes of tons of ships in your navies. So you knew what the tonnage of the other man's ship was going to be. Now, I go back to the wooden sailing ship, the wooden battleship. You built the best ship you could at home with the woods that you had at home, with the fibers you had at home to make your sails, with the best fibers you had at home to make your ropes. But then the ship started out as you came to another country where they didn't have any knots in the trees, and they careened your ship and put in a mast, much better mast. You came to a place like the Philippine Islands and found much better fiber for your ropes. So you put on that and put a lot more on board to take home. And you came to a place like Egypt, you found much better, longer fibers for your sails. So as the ship went around the world, she continually was improved and she could handle very much greater stresses. These ships, because the laws of the land, people on various countries around the land could not be enforced out in the water any further than you could throw something, a missile would go. So a 3-mile limit was really the limit. So 3/4 earth was outside the law. And the people who lived in what I call the great war ocean world were inherently outlaws. The top one called himself sovereign, the others were just pirates. But the pirates then saw you could waylay a ship coming all the way from the Orient, and with a few people on board, good fighters, you just take it over. So piracy was rampant. And you have the ships on the sea with the curvature there, and get out sight just 14 miles away called down under. And we have these ships of the sea becoming aware of the other one and stalking each other in moonlight nights to try to see if they can analyze what kind of mass he really has, what kind of sales he made. You could tell from the cut of this thing whether he really had stronger equipment. If you found that you had the stronger equipment, then you engaged with the other man in a gale, because he was going to have to take off sail, or the sail would just tear out. So we have then two ships of exactly the same size, but the equipment is so much stronger that this is what I call then doing more with less. This is the performance of doing more with the same tonnage, but you way outperform the other man goes to the bottom. This was then in what was called classified information of these great nations or groups coming together to see who's going to survive. The most classified information is what you can do with the same. The other man sees what you have and he thinks he understands exactly. He doesn't realize you have a better alloy here, whatever it is, and when it comes to contact, he's going to go down. This is what you call classified information. This hit me very hard in the Navy because I saw there was a possibility, way back in 1917, that they're doing more with less, which was quite clearly the game, and was being conducted very powerfully, and science was being put at it. We might gradually do so much with so little, because I saw there was a fallout of this up onto the land. And we did take refrigeration on the land, and of course when we're not using for the primary purpose of the weaponry, there was a fallout, and it could be useful. I thought we might possibly develop a sum total technology which did so much with so little, it might be able to take care of everybody. This was my first intuition in 1917, and it was terribly exciting, though it seemed a long cry. 1927, I'd gotten out of the Navy in 1922, and I had 5 years in the building world, where I got up 240 small buildings, but I really learned about that building world. And I saw the building world was thousands of years behind the sea technology, and the people on the land really were not understanding it, that you might be doing more, you might be able to. So 1927, I decided that I would commit the rest of my days to exploring whether we might not be able to do more with us, because all the capital and all the credit was going to the negative, to kill, because if you assume there's nowhere nearly enough to go around, that man is supposed to be a failure, there's no use in doing things directly for people, because it's just open-ended and get nowhere. That is the working assumption. If you ever wonder why the politician really it does not make good social decisions, because that's the way he's informed by his economists. So I said, I see that people don't know what, for instance, environment control. There's nothing being done about man's living. Just to make that terribly clear to you today, it still is absolutely there. Anybody gets into architecture building, you don't have to be an architect, however, to say, you do not talk about the buildings around in London in terms of weight. Yet you do talk about all your ships at the sea, and you know exactly what the big tankers weigh, just what the Queen Mary weighed. The 747 weighs, you know exactly what you're getting out of every ounce of material you put in, out of every erg of energy, and out of every second of time invested. You have then exact set of performance requirements and exactly what it takes to do it. But on the land, we're still going on very enormous superstition and things. And the bigger and heavier and higher, the more secure. So I saw that nobody really ever looked into to see what you might really need to take care of human beings. This became really very exciting to me, just in the terms of a grand scientific challenge. What do we need for environment control? Man's going to need a lot of things. We must not try to stop things. For instance, you need a lot of water, or you're going to perish. But you can't drink it all when it rains. How do I intercept the rain and again the holding pattern to flow into our circulatory system and the magnitudes and frequencies that work? So I saw what are called environment controlling got to be some way of dealing with environment is a great complex of events and not things. And they had all these different frequencies and magnitudes, and then environment control would be some way of giving man this kind of advantage, but also I saw it absolutely necessary to do the most with the least. And obviously a sphere, for instance, would enclose most volume with the least surface. I had to pay attention to that. Also I then found that the only stable polygon is triangle. So an omnitriangulated sphere would give me the most volume with the least surface and would give me the greatest strength of the least material. you can understand exactly how I got to geodesics at rate purely on that basis. I can see that there was no accident that nature, when she had important phenomena, our heads were not cubes, our heads were spheroidal, and all the fruits and all the eggs and anything nature had of any importance were in spheroids, and whether atoms or planets. And so that I said, while people are not familiar with the idea of this kind of structure, that for the moment is absolutely irrelevant. I must really engage in seeing exactly how much is necessary to serve human beings, to give them protection they need, let in what they want when they want it, keep out what they don't want when they don't want it. And this brought me into a totally new kind of a world. And I can really say to you now categorically, because there are now over 100,000 of these geodesic domes somewhere around the world. And most of them have really gone into places where nothing else will work. I should say one over the exact South Pole right now, the exact South Pole. And the scientists found at the South Pole a lake a mile deep. And borings there indicated we're going to learn something about biological life on that continent, which could be of great importance that humanity didn't know about. You could not, where the winds get up to 180 miles an hour, snow's so dry, drifting around, you can't go around boring under those conditions. So they had to have a comprehensive environment control covering a large enough area to make it really worthwhile to have the different kinds of samplings. And we found that the geodesic dome was the only thing it had Arctic snow loads of 60 pounds per square foot. This had to be able to take 300 pounds per square foot because it's going to be the Antarctic things that get covered with snow right away and get buried very, very deeply, fantastic pressures. So this had to be designed to be gradually buried very, very deeply and go down through tunnels into it. But then that gave them one great big environment control, and then they have secondary little research stations around which they can move around under those conditions. They didn't have to heat the bigger one. There's the heat's coming out of the small ones where they are, but leak out of the large one, make a tolerable kind of an atmosphere. Anyway, this dome is almost as large as the Expo Dome in Montreal, but it was light enough and so beautifully designed that it could go in a few airplane loads and could be assembled within the very critical short time when man would not perish there at the South Pole, and be able to do all those things. Nothing else could meet up with those requirements except going into omnitriangulated spherical structures. Now, there's what I say, top of Mount Fuji. It is a weather radar, but the winds are incredible, and yet it was light enough to be taken up by one helicopter installed, and the space inside is equivalent of 5 8-room houses. It's a good big sphere, and yet helicopter deliverable. Doing because that's so much so little. I do all the engineering on all the structures we do have up that have been major installations had to be calculated with the well-known engineering structural analysis. It had to satisfy engineers of building departments and so forth. And man, all that work is always on what they call continuous compression. There is no calculation in engineering of buildings that understands tensegrity or discontinuous compression, which is the way the universe is put together, where the moon and the earth don't touch each other, where nothing is touching each other. We simply have these beautiful mass interactions of alloying and so forth. And so I found that when I really get into what size structures I now know how to produce, provided with disarmament, I can really use the extraordinary forges and beautiful things used in making guns. If I have that kind of tooling, I can give you 300 buildings for one. Against the best-known engineering strategies today, I can give you 300 environmental controls for one against the best-known building arts of today. And I now know what I'm talking about to such an extent here that I can really say categorically, also in energy studies, just a very simple matter that when we double the dimension of the dome, we get 2 to the second power as a surface, or 4 times my surface, and the volume is 2 to the third power. So every time I double the size of a dome, I have 8 times as much atmosphere inside, and I have only 4 times my surface. So every time I double, I halve the amount of surface to which an interior molecule of atmosphere could gain or lose heat. This is well known again in the ship world. of yesterday. When you double the size, length of your ship, you had 8 times much payload, and only 4 times much surface of friction to drive the ship through. So the bigger you made your ship, the more efficient you became. So I see this had absolute pertinence and relevance when I came to doing my buildings. It paid to get the bigger and bigger building, etc. And when I got into all the energy studies and the recirculating, because way back in 1927 I started then on the semi-autonomous dwelling, where you would take advantage of the energies in the human waste and so forth, and would use our wind powers. As of this last year, late June and early July, at the University of Pennsylvania, a group of young people the leaders of whom had been in a number of my World Game operations, and very, very capable group, came together, and they took a problem, a very specific problem, and the problem was getting all the world to enjoy the same amount of energy advantage that had been operating in the United States, which is very much higher than elsewhere around the world, taking the 1972 energy income per capita in the United States, to get this capability to the rest of the world, and looking into the fact then that we can now, due to ultra-high voltage transmission of electrical power, from World War I through up to a decade ago, 350 miles is the limit of deliverability of the electrical current. You have to go higher and higher voltages. The higher and higher voltages require so much insulating equipment, so it was impractical to go higher. But we get this now ultra-high voltage, we're able to deliver 1,500 miles. So in the energy studies we made, we then looked at all the water power, which had not been used before, because it was not, 350 miles would not bring the power to any parts of civilization. But with 1,500 mile reach, a very different picture comes in. Looking then at all the proven tidal power capabilities, all the proven thermal heat capabilities, all the proven windmill capabilities, and taking the actual technology already operative with those proven capabilities, going into a critical path study, such as going to the moon, first things first to be done, how long it take to order this equipment to get it installed. Went into the study then of bringing this energy to all of humanity, and we found that by 1985 we could have the whole world operating the same energy advantage as the United States in 1972, while concurrently phasing out all fossil fuels and all atomic energy. This became a very exciting piece of information, because we found that this was not being fostered at all by big governments and because the energy exploiting companies wanted something going over a pipe or a wire. They don't like human beings. Well, a rich man may have his sailing boat, but you just put up your sail and suddenly you got the energy right directly from cosmic energy to go around our planet. And so that the exploiting concept will not foster these kinds of undertakings, looking at them. And there's enormous commitments politically towards atomic powers or oil development. So even though we've found something, we really know it, it is not going to necessarily be operative. But the point is that this is now actually a beautiful piece of engineering and can be employed. There's no group of human beings with integrity could study and say it isn't so. Now, I can then say, in terms of my knowledge of energy and environment controlling, my knowledge of how much resources we really need to give human beings high living advantage, make it possible to get from here to there and do the things they need to do. I now can say categorically that I know that the resources we've already mined, and this is an important one for you, human beings have not realized this regarding the metals. It's not in the general thinking yet. But metals are behaviors of the universe. They are, and the relative abundance of these metals will remain very constant in the universe. Then, the metals can be melted up again and can be reused. Out of, for instance, on our planet today, 80% of all the copper going in production annually is coming out of scrap from yesterday. Only 20% is now coming from the mines. We go less and less to the mines and continually recirculate. We have the Bell Laboratory chief engineer in 1930 in New York finding out and being able to announce that the telephone company could expand the telephone service from 10% of humanity then enjoying it to all the people around the planet without the telephone company mining or buying another pound of copper. That they were learning to get so many more messages over each cross-section of copper wire. And he said that throughout the whole of the expansion of the telephone system from 10% to 100% of humanity, the telephone companies would be copper sellers, and they have been. We're at a point now where one communication satellite weighing 1/4 of a ton is outperforming 175,000 tons of copper cable for transatlantic communication. And is doing it very much higher fidelity. Now, they multiply 175,000 by 4, and you get a little idea of the enormous step up that occurs as you begin to, I find the metals then come out of all the investments that they stay in buildings longer than they do in telephones. They stay in automobiles a little longer than they do in the airplane, etc. But there's the whole of all the metals, will take the total bulk, they come out every 22 and a half years. Get recirculated every 22 and a half years. And as they come around 22 and a half years later, the interim gain in know-how is so extraordinary that, just to use a very simple one, you melt up one Cadillac and get 2 Japanese and very much better cars. So every time they come around and take care of more people, higher performance. The same metal. So what we do is, there really is in effect a kind of bloodstream of the metals, slow compared to our blood flow, but it is just exactly that. And every time it comes around, we have more information to mount onto that bloodstream to take care of the more people. So I can say then, with the knowledge we already have, with the metals we've already mined, I now know that it's feasible to take care of all of humanity at a higher standard of living than anybody's ever known, and it can be done by 1985. And therefore I know that all politics are obsolete. I know that all wars are obsolete. It doesn't have to be you or me at all. I now know that man is not supposed to be a failure, he's apparently designed to be a success. This is a very extraordinary realization. I said, when you first really have to be confronted with this information, be at it, but you know experimentally what you're talking about. Now realize then that one of the worst of all the weapons of the war was what? Lying, because man said, this man is sitting on the life support over here, and if I deceive him, get him out of the way, better than just out and out killing him. So lying became one of the great weapons employed by man. And as much as the universe operates on truth and not on lies, nothing man could have done such to disfavor himself as to get into the lying that he has. So I simply find it's a very sad matter. When I was young, I was being told by the older people, now, never mind what you think, really learn. This is the way the game goes. And I was being told never to do my own thinking. I also was being told, get over your sensitivity. Life is tough. So I found the young of yesterday were losing their beautiful sensitivity. They were not doing their own thinking. And the enormous bureaucracies of all the great traditions, really enormous momentum, what I just said. And people know that what my boss says, and I don't want to get my family in trouble, so they continually conforming. But one must realize that it's due to the fear generated by the love and the sense of responsibility. So I now know that lying is unnecessary. Lying only came about because man thought there's not enough to go around. And this seemed to be sort of easier way. Instead of having to kill the other man, he just kept silent when he knew it wasn't true, so he could get the job, whatever it might be. So I now then know that the whole concept that you have to earn a living. The reason earn a living is because you'd assume there's nowhere nearly enough to go around. Therefore, you have to prove yourself an exception so that the people who are in the life support control are going to let you in because they need you. You have to make good with the system. Somebody say, I now know that's invalid. I know we're here not for the muscle machine, not to be some automaton, not to be specialists, but really to have comprehensive concern about what it's all about, which every child is born that way. And I have to realize that the reason we have then specialization and so forth goes back to very simple facts of, I want you to think about an early human being born bigger than some other human beings. He didn't ask to be, but he's a big man, and they got these bananas around here. The little man said, Mister, I can't reach a banana. Reach me one of the bananas. So then the little people say, these other people coming after our bananas, Mr. Big Man, you get down here and find your parents. So the big man found himself being continually inducted by society for critical moments of survival. So he said, if I'm going to have to do the fighting for you, then I'm going to have little time to prepare for this. So he gradually, I got a command situation during the peacetime. So he gets to be king. This is, you don't understand how this power structure developed. Obviously, man being born naked and helpless. I can understand that perfectly. I can understand then that big man instinctively doesn't have to have very much education to do this. Don't let two of those big men come at me at once. I can lick one of them. I seem to be the toughest big man around here. But two of those guys could really trip me up. So that we have then his instinct that not only divide and conquer, but to keep conquered, keep divided. So I need you big men for when the wars come around. If I'm going to organize you, I'm going to make you a duke with this hill, and make you a duke with that hill. I'm going to have my spies watch you to be sure you don't gang up with it. So this was, you want to see really what this power structure has been through history. It's nothing could be more human and spontaneous than what I'm saying to you. At any rate, he then was greatly bothered by, other than the big ones who could overpower him, because he found a lot of little people who were not good fighters, but they were very clever. And they were stealing from him. They were not obeying his orders, getting ready for their war. So he said, big man, bring in that character. He's really troublemaker. And I said, I'm going to cut your head off, young man. And he said, Mr. King, I think you made a great mistake. I said, you're the president also. Why shouldn't I cut your head off? Well, Mr. King, I understand the language of your enemy over the hill, and you don't. I know what your enemy is saying he's going to do to you, and you don't. You got a pretty good idea, young man. You report me every day what my enemy is saying over there, and your head's going to stay on, and you're going to do something you never did before. You're going to eat regularly. How do you like that? If you do very well, I'm going to give you a little purple. So this way, this man is stealing from him. He said, Mr. King, you don't understand arithmetic, and I do. That's how people can steal from him. Instead of cutting my head off, and we use the arithmetic that people wouldn't steal from you and make out much better. So you got a pretty good idea. So whatever it was, and this man can make better swords and better metallurgy. He said, well, you mind your own business, you mind your business, you mind your business. I'm the only one minds everybody's business. I couldn't clear it. Then so he gets so many specialists working so competently for him. He gets so much information about his enemies over their hills that he gets to have his kingdom gets bigger and bigger. And he's now getting old. He wants his grandson to take over. So he sees these people getting to it. I want you to teach somebody about that language that you did. I want you to teach somebody about that arithmetic and so forth. This is the foundation of Oxford University. You don't really understand is exactly how man got into specialization. And we just take India, the case of India, which the more northerly people are, the more kinds of environmental conditions they have to deal with. In Africa, you come to Lake, the lake is just all water, and you don't want to have to go way around and you build a boat to see wood floats. But if you come to Lake Baikal in eastern Russia, and if you invent a boat in the summer, but it invents skates in the winter. We found that the more annual environment, the more inventive man had to be. It didn't make him clever, but he had more occasion to. The people from the north began to have more tools to wield, and with their tools and their mobile tools, they kept invading India, the people of the south. And as they did so, the conquerors say, boy, you got a beautiful language. Don't let anybody change that language. You got a lovely language too. You keep your language and you keep your religion. You got a lovely religion. You think the number of sects. Everything in India could not be more divided against itself, absolutely deliberately. This is one of the things they're really up against today. I want then to understand how the specialization occurred, but also it is very important for us to know that scientifically the biologists have discovered and the anthropologists that human tribes have become extinct and biological species become extinct. The one thing common to they become extinct is over-specialization. And over-specialization is always, you can inbreed fast-running capability of the horse by taking two fast-running horses. The probability of the genes to bring this about being concentrated is high, but you do so at the expense of breeding out general adaptability. I give you general adaptability. The big things occur very much less frequently than the little things, so that You beat out general adaptability and get on very nicely under the smaller pattern, the local pattern, the only thing you're really looking for now is exploit this fast running capability, whatever it may be. But you beat out general adaptability, and when suddenly the big thing happens, then that species all through. You lost the capability to get on those variable conditions. So I say human society is in an enormously critical position. Everybody electing someone to act for them, assuming that you and I don't have the capability, and much to be with our such as proving our right to live and all that. So humanity leaving this to a very few to carry things out, and that very few are doing it politically, are not in the position of really understanding generalized principles and science and things I've just given you. The big thing is I'm terribly excited to realize that various individuals have just, I'm absolutely convinced that I could not be a more typical example of just a healthy, average human being. But I, by good fortune, had things happen to me that made me look here and look there. And so that I happen to be the first really look over the hill and see that man is designed to be a success and not a failure. Now I come back to the other things I've said to you. He has in mind, I'd like to understand why he is here. He apparently is absolutely unique. So my way of looking at that is the following. I'm going to take a very complicated design, and I find society tending then to think nothing of anything anymore. So Boeing 747 couldn't be a more regular thing. Everybody knows about that. And say, I don't know whether I really prove these things or not. But the point is that Boeing 747 can go through it's designed to go through the sky at 10 times the velocity of a hurricane. Now the resistance increases as the second power of the speed, so that the actual ferocity of the interaction of an airplane, Boeing 747, is 100 times the ferocity of a hurricane. You think about the ferocity of a hurricane, these are the interactions, actually, the relationships and environment that ship is designed to be able to cope with absolutely competently. Or to be able to have that ship weighing 200 tons fully loaded, making a landing, putting 200 tons into contact with the earth at 150 miles an hour, and have the music going is quite a piece of design. So, whether you're impressed or not, I'm deeply impressed with that design. And it is because of that, it did have this military significance, developing those ships. Who's going to really run the world? The line supply control, that's all the supply has, all the scientific benefit to get where it has gotten. At any rate, in order to have that ship, you also have up in the fire cabinet where the pilots and engineers are, there are almost 1,000 instruments. And those instruments are telling about everything critical on the ship, the pressures here, the temperatures there, the stresses. And we have a number of engineers then and pilots to watch those dials, and if they see something doing this, going a little out of order, then there's another dial next to you, just make it match an automated response set up. But every once in a while the pilot, chief pilot, or other pilot notices lack of information coming in those instruments. And he realizes that something is really going wrong. He has to then go off automated, take it over the control, only by virtue of being a human being with a mind and access to the principles of the universe can he really coordinate to save that ship. This becomes really very impressive to me then, that human beings have that kind of a reference to the laws of the universe itself, that we don't know of any other creature having this extraordinary kind of accessibility. I want you to then think about a really very big design that makes it Boeing 747 absolutely nothing, and that would be a design of an eternally regenerative universe, which as far as physics can find out today, there's no experimental evidence of energy being created, being lost. Apparently, the universe is a minimum set of intertransformings to take care of eternal self-regeneration, with the gravitational effectiveness just a little more powerful than the radiational, so that the conservation of gravity simply holding some sort of mean. Same energy investment, but I'd like to understand. Think about a hexagon. And with 6 edges of your hexagon, you have 6 radii. And the radii of the hexagon and the chords are the same length. Consider those to be vectors. And the fact that we find that with every energy event, there are always 6 moves to be made. So you have 6 vectors to invest. The 6 vectors going out radially are trying to explode, and as they explode, they disintegrate, go away from each other, so the gravitational effectiveness is less. The other 6 contain them and come back and touch themselves. They close the ends, the closed system against an open. We find that the gravitational effectiveness of those vectors are more effective always than the radiation. So the tendency of the universe to explode and come apart is overcome fundamentally by that you find the gravitational constant just a little greater than the radiational constant. Fine, then we have an eternally regenerative universe. In order to be able to have an eternally regenerative universe with 92 regenerative chemical elements and their beautiful associabilities, so absolutely unique behaviors, unique frequencies, fantastically high frequency in the transforming, the whole universe continually everywhere transforming at different rates, doing all these things and following this extraordinary set of laws. There's bound to be, I would think, in view of the freedom of design, the options of the design, where you can come out a daisy or a galaxy. In such a complexity of options, there's bound to be, I think, some kind of problems locally that need some of the same capability in the human mind, access to great laws of the universe to solve the problems. So I said, what do I know that's common to all human beings in all history? I think problems. The one thing that we're here for problem solving. That's what we're here for. Problems are not something just a temporary friction. If you're any good at problem solving, you get to run into many more problems to solve. This increase exponentially. I find then that's what we're here for, and we are then local monitors, having enormous information seeking capability, propensity to get the information, but the ability in principle to extend that telescope to get information 11.5 billion light years away, information all around us. We go into the microcosm. But we have that fantastic kind of penetrating information capability that nothing else has. If those human beings on our planet have been able to take that inventory of that many galaxies, we've been able to take the light coming from all of them photographically, running it through the spectroscope, and we've been able to take, on our planet, little tiny human beings have inventory, the relative abundance of all the chemical elements present in 11.5 billion light year sweep-out. Fantastic capability. So I quite clearly, we're not here for our muscle at all, we're here for our minds. And I see that muscle is still in control. That is a Brezhnev and a Ford meeting the power structure. And so we're here for our mind and not for muscle. I think the critical thing is going on. Humanity has gradually, through all these experiences, been able to invent the words to communicate, so I can give you what my experience has been, so we can compound our experiences, the ability to write those, and so we can compound the experiences of other generations. But we've been developed 100,000 words in the Oxford Dictionary, that we have 100,000 nuances of experience that so unique that they need their own word, and we would read out 100,000 of those words. A fantastic amount of agreement in humanity. That we've been able to go that far, and that kind of information that I've now been inventorying with you is something that is really highly available. Luckily, I broke away from being a specialist and really being a comprehensivist and trying to pay attention to the big patterns. That's the only reason I'm not familiar enough to talk the way I am with the inventory of information. The point is, I see that we are quite clearly here as a local monitor to handle metaphysical problems, to really find principles, the right principles, our operatives, to be able to employ them. The rate at which we require that capability makes it suddenly clear to me we are at a really new threshold. Somehow or other, we've now qualified to be able to get all together. We were given the problem of survival in order to find some principles. I see now at the point where that could be absolutely put aside, and I know we can get on with design success and not a failure. You know, all inferiority complex about that. We should now be really free to become preoccupied with local universe problems, all of which means some absolutely new universe opening up before us. I see then, here we are in birth. We're coming out of some womb of permitted ignorance to allow us, as by design, to be born ignorant and have to find out, discover our minds are the whole show and not our muscle. See then, we're in this very critical condition where the mind, if power remains in the saddle, we are coming to a condition where the game of scoring, for instance, of money is a very superficial affair. I'd just like to understand that a little better. Because in order to be able to show that we're going to carry on so forth, we are given that hunger, so you go after food. So there really is a drive like that, and we have then, in order to have biological life on our planet, in order to be able to have the human life, to have this local monitor with this extraordinary capability to reach the information of the great laws of the universe itself. We have then, you and I can't take the sun radiation through our skin to keep growing. We have to have an enormous amount of energy to be regenerated. So we find all the vegetation designed to do that for us. Algae in the water and on the other vegetation in the dry land. And it does it by photosynthesis, so that the tree, in order to be able to expose enough leafage to really take in enough radiation, has to have roots, so in a great storm it will not be blown away. It has to have also roots by osmosis to take water out of the ground, osmosis by a one-way valve going this way, to water cool it, also to give it actually structural strength, because nature has all the compression done in you and I and the trees by hydraulics, not by crystallines. Hydraulics absolutely non-compressible, distribute their loads. That's the reason why a great tree can hold out a 5-ton branch here and not break off. You and I can't hold such weights with this kind of weight. So I find then the design of the human beings has to have the vegetation. The vegetation had to be rooted. So the vegetation is rooted, then it also is giving off gases, and the gases given off will soon, in the chemical photosynthetic process, would soon occupy the whole atmosphere, and the tree couldn't carry on anymore. But it needs another kind of gas, so all the mammals are designed to take on the gases. They need the gas given off by the vegetation, converting it back. So here's this respiratory into complementation, absolutely unknown to man originally. So that we find then this enormous intercomplementation going on, so the vegetation then, being rooted, can't reach the other vegetation to procreate. Nothing could be, the whole system then, that design breaks down. So in order to make that work, nature then has all the insects and the birds and going back and forth trafficking between all the vegetation. In order to be able to get all the worms and the birds and honeybees to do what they got to do, they're all given chromosomic drives. They're all given, the honeybee simply keeps going after flower, and inadvertently knocks off pollen. So the honeybee is not there for the honey, for what the bee gets out of the way, honey or the queen bee. The bee is there for the cross-fertilization. What you and I tend to call the side effects. We made the prime effect of getting out, going out and getting our food. But we were really here for this other kind of monitoring task, which we didn't realize that we were here to really be discovering that we have a mind. Now, so then the man sort of develops a kind of a comprehensive honey that makes it sort of interchangeable for shoes and other things down to the ground. So we call it money. So money being honey. It's absolutely clear. Now, when I became terribly interested in principles back in 1927, when I realized that we had a new child, we were penniless, and I realized it could be that if I went after this concept of environment controlling, it might and could use the highest kind of capability, the finest engineering science we're using only for the military side. It might be possible to make this thing work. Being penniless and so forth, I said, what can an individual do that great corporations and great states can't do? Because number one, they can't think; they're just legal entities. There's only human beings who think, and the human beings can make up their mind to act much more rapidly than bureaucracy. So that I could have an advantage. And anyway, I said, one principle that I'm absolutely convinced of the significance of the phenomenon of precession. Precession is not well understood. The precession is the effect of all independent bodies in the universe on other independent bodies in the universe. The effect of the sun on the earth is precessional and makes it go into orbit around it and not to fall in it. We find then that the effect of the nucleus on the electrons go in orbit. Everything is in orbit now. This is the basic precessional effect. So I saw that everything really, the total success, the total regenerative universe, regeneration is cyclic. It is then closing circles, giving that conservation, for instance, those vectors. So I saw then what really is going on that you and I call side effect is the precessional effect. And we were simply paying attention to 180 degrees, thinking very much in the linear drive. We were very linear in our thinking, and then fell very much to the idea of specialization. That's something that's very easy to get a man to do. Just really look out for himself and leave it to somebody else. So I then said back in 1927, I'm so convinced of precession, the 90-degree effect, it could be that if instead of getting somebody's approval, because nobody was going to prove what I was going to do, but I was really going to commit the rest of my life to environment control and see how he cut down the weight and so forth, found out whether he really could make man a success. I said, I'm going to peel off, and it could be then that if I really, the big thing, man just discovered a few years ago, he was talking ecology. There were ecologists long ago, but society didn't know anything about ecology. They were suddenly discovering the side effect. The big thing was suddenly coming into view. So back in 1927, just really a little earlier, by the same kind of circumstances, in the sense as acceleration of the circumstances that bring society in general to come to the conditions of today. Anyway, I said, I can see that the big show is off this way. Supposing I then commit myself to what apparently nature is trying to do, make man a success. If I really commit myself, they're going to be first things first. I've got to know, see what I need to do. I've got to make lighter weight structures or whatever it may be. They're very quite clearly set of things that need to be attended to. What I would need to learn not to be able to attend to them a little more effectively. At any rate, I said, I'm going to commit myself to doing this, and now it could be that if I'm doing what nature wants you to do, you're going to find yourself supported completely indirectly. No, there's nothing you can really match as any kind of bargaining. If I do this, then you're going to pay me. You watch me and you're going to kind of reward me. It's not going to work that way at all. You really have to, absolutely open system where you must never try to fool nature into supporting you. You must do what nature wants done. So this is the way I committed myself back in 1927. And the fact is I have been able to survive, but it's been a very tortuous affair. And you have to watch your intuitions all the time. This is far as, suddenly find as far as you're supposed to go. This one. So like sailboat, you're going to come out on the other tack. Go to starboard out with my port tack. Then they go as fast as I can there, and then they go this way. And so I have been able to not only survive, but I find the credit coming to, I started absolutely penniless, unknown, no credit whatsoever. So the credit actually has gradually increased, so I'm able to get around. I can get to, when somebody asks me to come around the world, do this and that. I never go anywhere unless I'm asked to. I don't have any managers or anybody trying to promote what I'm doing. I don't allow anybody who works with me closely to promote anything, ask anybody to look at us at all. I must commit myself completely to dealing in artifacts. I saw that nature is continually transforming, that you could, by understanding the principle, you could participate in the transforming. And when I develop environment controls, I'm really simply employing the same principles. Nature is to make the egg or the protein shell that encloses all the viruses and so forth. So the fact is then, I'm absolutely confident today that what I undertook this way of really trusting the universe, and I'll show you the first day when I started to do this. Number one, my wife was willing. Our little baby didn't know what was going on. I had to just make my mind that she'd be much happier when she grew up. She found that I really committed myself this way instead of how to find special advantage for her. And right now, my wife's family, my family, all thought it was absolutely treacherous and it was a terrible thing to do. And all my friends had acted that way, but so it was not an easy matter in the early days. But I'm now absolutely convinced that I'm not misleading any young people when I say to you, you can get all together forever, earning a living. And just really look around and see what needs to be done. Same race, you and I, we were sailors in the same boat. We begin to know very quickly somebody on board is a politician, and all the rest are really sailors, and you don't need any politician to tell you what to do on your boat. You really understand, you really coordinate very spontaneously. I point out then here is a synergy, and there's phenomenal entropy where things come apart, the energies come out, and there's phenomenal syntropy where energy is being gathered. Our planet is one of the places where, following Romer's discovery of the importing, exporting of energy that Einstein began to deal in, that all the stars are giving off energies, and the place where energy is being collected in order for the universe to be eternally regenerative and conserved, would not be giving off anything for us to see them by us. Because all is so astronomically with the consequence of the entropic radiation given off, which you could see. So our planet is the only place we actually know anything about, but our planet is a place where energy is being collected randomly and going in, converting the beautiful random or random disorder of the sun radiation into beautiful molecular structures, ordered. Everything biologically is continually exactly anti-entropic, so I call that syntropic. So we find we're at a syntropic center, and we're here syntropically to solve problems. This is what we're here for. We're the most powerful syntropic force we know to be operative in the universe. Certainly find we have really very great significance, and I would assume then that the universe would not then, and she has a very important function, she doesn't have it all in one basket, as the saying goes. I find that in order to have that vegetation do what it does, in order to have life on our planet at all, the vegetation can't then, the function is to impound radiation. So it can't have its young and its shadow because it won't have any radiation to impound. So one of the most important things with vegetation is to get its seed deployed, but it's rooted, so it can't get off to sow it at all. So it has to design the seeds in beautiful little airplanes and so forth to go off. So a tree is giving off 100,000 of these little airplanes. The possibility that in this random kind of broadcasting that one's going to land where it's not possible is very poor. But nature has a very important function and poor chance of actual survival. She makes many, many stops. In order to have this extraordinary kind of a function of you and I being born naked and helpless, so forth, taking millions and millions of years to develop the point where we do have the words and enough information to show the principle and communicate the way I am communicating with it, seems to me the chances of it really coming through successfully must be very, very poor. So I assume that nature has many, many such stars. They would not look like the same in any other biosphere, any other kind of environmental condition. We have exactly the conditions we'd have to have this particular kind of biosphere. Where the temperature is such that we can be primarily made out of water, not freezing to death, but it may be very, very special conditions. Incidentally, the only place we know about any water in the concentrated. Think of this tiny little surface film of that water on our planet. At any rate, I would think then we're in this very critical condition, having been, let's say, a great group boom of committed ignorance, with adequate resource which supply us to make all the trial and error of the experiment. Get where we are. We're now at the point where we've really used up the nutriment. And the good analogy of this is just we think of the chicken, the embryo in an egg, and has all these chemical nutrients to take care of it. One thing is eating outside of heat. Yes, that heat is must become at a very slow rate. Otherwise it gets too high, it's going to be destroyed. And when the chicken then uses all that nutriment, and finally it's all complete inside the egg, and looking around, now it has a packing thing built and looking for more of that nutriment, breaks the egg open incidentally. I see us really in that kind of condition, just breaking open our egg of the permitted ignorance. We've been all in this, but suddenly now we're going to really have to use our mind. And I say, the curves that I see indicate that within the next 10 years, mind comes in complete control of our world, where we do things that can unite this way, we really think and we can really understand one another. The power is still in. We've failed to qualify for our function. Power can't do this. We really, at the point where mind must come in the supremacy over the power. And I think it's all to do with the extraordinary fact, just in my own lifetime, the amount of literacy around the world. The literacy of world society was about 90% when I was young, and it's not true anymore. And what's really happened the way of information, nobody knew we were going to have radio, nobody knew we were going to have telephone, nobody knew we were going to be able to talk around our world in split seconds. All these things have come in very much that I'd call absolute surprise, evolutionary advancement. Clearly, beautifully designed to be sure that we did get to the point where it's no longer just a pharaoh who has to make some kind of, it's going to be, everybody has to be in on the problem, and everybody has to really use their integrity, and everybody has to then be very spontaneously cooperative with others. This is it. We're going to have to go from being entropic or give all kinds of separating, all of it organized today, looking out for this me, looking out for this my family, looking out for our company, looking out for our side, everybody against everybody else. We're going to have to, within the next, My figures would say, in the next 5 years, all the solid remnants of our Earth have to go. Have to stop altogether. It was all very well in the vegetation era where you had your roots, but now it's the metals coming from around the total world that recirculating makes it possible really to take care of the higher and higher performance of absolutely free flow of those metals. All the resources have to be able to continue to transfer around. So if you find something familiar around you coming apart, don't be alarmed. If it doesn't come apart, we're going to fail. If we're in failure for revolution, but if it is a bloody revolution, we're all through. If it's a power revolution, we're through. The only way we're going to really get through is really using our mind, really continue. Don't use your head for battering rams, use your head to think. This is here. I'm convinced that's the test, sort of, that each human being does, the integrity of each human being, each minute of his consciousness is life. Now on is really there, because I think it's very absolutely touch and go whether we can make it. I know we have the option to make it, but whether we're going to have the slice of it is completely touch and go. And it's really going to depend on that the strange disposition of each one of us, whether you're going to throw it in the floor, or you're going to put it in the wastebasket, or whether you're going to saw it or not saw it. Tiniest little things are going to be it's not each people doing something very big, it's the integrity of each human being every minute. And I couldn't be more moved than to hear that I found myself living almost 80, that I'm here, that you would ask me to come and talk to you, commit yourself to not letting me express my experiences, my thoughts. I find this a very hopeful kind of sign. And I'm biggest, most hopeful sign I have the following. We have, throughout all early history of human beings, as with all the mammals, the male sweeps out large areas and the female in the young. And the male human kept hunting and bringing things in. The woman, she found that had a fire, you could make the food last a little longer, cauterizing it. Make the fire, took a lot of time. Fires were dangerous much, so you had to tend the fire. So the women tended the hearth and the men brought everything home. Not only did man bring home his food, life support, but he also, gradually woman lived and domesticated. He didn't have to do so much of that kind. But daddy has always been bringing home the news about the rest of the world. The kids at home didn't have. That's the only way that their home contact with the world came through the father. And mothers taught other mothers, and their men and brothers, and so she did some sort of secondary integration of the information and gave it to the kids. And mom and dad told you this way, your grandfather did what your mother, all the people before you learned this is what you do under these critical conditions. So all the information came to the young life came really common to the parent. There was absolute authority of what's going on in the world and how to carry on. This was when I was born. Marconi discovered the principle of wireless, but it did not go into use until I was 12 years of age, as SOS, Morse code. So when I was young, all my friends, we were trying to make some of the apparatus and so forth. It's not experimental work, but this doesn't come in until I'm fairly. I was 3 years of age when the electrons discovered. Nobody paying attention had been discovered. That was not a very popular event. And when I was 23 years of age, we had the first voice on the radio. When I was 27, we had the first licensed broadcasting station. 1932, when I was, 1927, I was 32 years of age. Daddy came home and the kid said, "Daddy, come in here quickly, listen to the radio. Man just rode across the Atlantic." Daddy, "Wow!" Daddy came in really listening to this thing. And from that time on, Daddy never brought home the news again. This is very much more sudden, fundamentally, in society attended with a big commitment was going on there. Because then the people got their jobs on the radio, got it by virtue of their popularity, of their vocabulary, of their pronunciation and so forth, and the size of the vocabulary, and the versatility in using it. Then suddenly came something very much bigger, was the television. Television is just not improved radio, because the speed of sound is only 700 miles an hour, and you can only hear for a very short distance. It has to be gas to be disturbed by the waves. There's no sound up in space. But the sight speed at 700 million miles an hour. Our sight is exactly a million times faster than our hearing, and its range goes into our ability to see the live show coming from the Andromeda a million light years ago, 1.5 million times 6.5 trillion to get an idea how many miles that we're seeing. Furthermore, the sound language became alliterated. Daddy kept bringing home the news. That's the way he thought they said it, but he said it so many different ways that finally tribes really have different kind of languages. And the kid he's trying to copy it. So gradually in the copying, things get very, very sloppy. We get to very different kinds of ethnic language. But we have, so the sound language is a very limited one, how many people understand that word. But the sight language is absolutely universal. You recognize that as water, but maybe you don't have, and then I was a language clause. I find that when it came in with television, it was actually a million-fold step up in information distributed, and became a basing of our earth. So the time daddy and mom, kids see daddy and mom listening to that authority. And this way the authority said it, and then the kids emulate the language of the people on the radio and television. This is where the whole language changed, not through school, but through this extraordinary new medium. And in fact, I find everywhere I go around the world today, the literacy and the communication capability is there. But this wasn't there yesterday at all. So the evolution powerfully at work here. But the big thing was that in order for us to go through being born, naked, and helpless, you had to have this phenomenal tradition of daddies and moms, the greatest care, being sure that their life best to know the way you do it. So the tradition is fantastically strong, but nature absolutely deliberately cut off that tradition with introducing it to strong, really unexpected wireless. That's how we talk about wireless. You don't have a slice idea how to do it, it's fun to do it. Now, I certainly like to have it fairly clearly understood. I say we have the umbilical cord while the child is in the womb. He can't get the oxygen to purify his blood and getting from his mother's umbilical cord. Suddenly, child out of the womb, you cut it. But the child can't start running around right away. He's not ready to operate independently. It takes quite a long time. I see what happened in this 1927 was, and then television, very much more powerfully, the first students to be dissidents made the world news at the University of California at Berkeley were born the year the television came to American homes. And suddenly the young people were saying, I know Mom and Dad love me very much, and I love them very much, but I see they don't know what's going on, they're not getting us the mood, so forth, and here's the authority. Dad and Mom were no longer the authority. They were just human beings to be loved and so forth, but they didn't know what's going on, and they felt kids encouraged saying they seem to be very locally preoccupied, and the compassion of youth that's born is very, very great, and they see people in trouble all around the world, and you couldn't get them just to be preoccupied with the troubles locally ever again. These are incredible irreversibilities that nature was introducing, absolutely unexpected by any society whatsoever, anywhere. So I see then this young world coming through, where daddy and mom are no longer the authority, and the child spontaneously, his brain says that's your smell, and his brain says that's your see. The child says that's what I see, that's what I smell. The child used to say, he was being told, mother said, the child said, that man said, don't say that down, that's your daddy's boss, he loses his job. And my daddy loses his job, what did I say? They were told to lie. This lying is going on and on and on, but there's a young world suddenly out from under and being spontaneously truthful. Doesn't mean they don't have to teach the truth, as I see, as I smell. We have then a young world coming through, no longer feeling that they're no longer being told, never mind what you think. They are intuitively aware that the older world is preoccupied in much too short-sighted ways, and the world is in trouble. So we have the young world doesn't know what you ought to do about it. The point is that they're spontaneously truthful. Nobody's saying to them, you've got to get over your sensitivity like the top. They're all keeping their sensitivity. So my hope is, all of my hope is that I see a completely new world coming through that is not being de-geniused and so forth by the fears of the parents, and that is spontaneously truthful and is concerned about the totality. I say evolution is manifesting some phenomenon. This is by far the most encouraging thing I know. And I find that young world deeply impressed with the fundamental mystery. Not the mysteries they're being told to understand in terms of well-known religion. They're finding the mystery. They're intuitively aware it is there. And here, of all this synergetic phenomena they know, is the phenomenon of love, because stones don't love stones. This little child is born in something strange kind of phenomenon that's being loved, this phenomenon of love. And it may be parents in love, but you suddenly love this gal, or whatever it is. The point is, love is a very extraordinary, mysterious thing that young world feels. Utterly synergetic, utterly mystical. So I simply find the young world keeping its sensitivity, deeply impressed with loving. I find the young world no longer ashamed of loving, no longer ashamed of their sensitivity. They really have very frequently grown men, 21 and so forth, coming up to me now and kiss me on the lips and to say, you told me the truth. And they kiss me with a tenderness my mother kissed me. This tenderness there's a tenderness, there's a truthfulness, and the inclusiveness. Our whole hope is there.